This is a video about how to win friends and influence people by Dale Carnegie. So let's follow this train of thought. Now this is a long production, so consider taking notes and let's jump in. So idea 1, 85% of success is due to personality. So let's create a narrative bias. There is personality and there's productivity. Which one is more effective? Now one may say clearly this depends on a variety of variables as humans and environments are complex. But let's look at this from this particular lens. From this perspective, the skill in human engineering, personality is the success. But let's ask a question. What is human engineering? Let's define this as a successful and effective way to coexist with other human beings. Maybe we can challenge that definition, but for now, let's work with it. So let's take John, and John works in a shop, and he is a successful manager because he knows how to manage people. His ability to engineer people, making them feel valued and good, has led to John's success, because John is all about empowering his people. So here we have the ability to engineer groups of people effectively, which is a valuable skill. Now let's turn the tables. Now this is a story that I was told about a scientist. Now this scientist, he was a genius, but unfortunately for him, he had no social intelligence. Now despite his academic performance, this gentleman ended up jobless. He lacked that social engineering that is so important. So here we have an anecdote that would indicate the power of personality. So we can take this idea and understand that it may be a valuable one for the toolkit. Now the next idea is that criticism is dangerous. Now there's a premise to this. Constructive criticism is different to criticism. They are two different trains, so to speak. Constructive criticism, for example, can be useful. It can be effective. These balloons can fly and give us understanding. So let's give an example. If we are unsuccessful in a job interview, constructive criticism is needed. It can prepare us intellectually for the next job. The way you answered the questions, your demeanor, your report, your research, these are crucial factors, and constructive criticism is important. But criticism that is not constructive can be dangerous. Think of a lion, and in this context, we don't want to be a lion. So let's look at a social situation. Let's take Sally, who's on a night out with Sarah. So there should be good vibes. But Sally says to Sarah, I don't like those shoes and I dislike the colour of your hair. So what is the unintended consequence here? Now this criticism, Sally, can cause contention, it can cause conflict, and it can offend. Now Sally might like Sarah, but Sarah might not like Sally, and that would be understandable considering her actions. Now the book gives the example, a very good example, of Abraham Lincoln criticizing James Shields in a letter which was a scathing attack. Now this scathing attack almost led to a duel. Now fortunately the duel never occurred, but Abraham Lincoln, he learned from this lesson, because the philosophy of criticism can be a very dark path which can lead to some dark places. Lo and behold, Abraham Lincoln did not repeat these actions. Now, criticism, when not constructive, is like a sword. It can slash your relationships. This can be in a business or in a personal context. Now, please understand the difference between criticism and constructive criticism. Figuratively speaking, one is with a good heart and one is with a bad heart. And please understand that criticism can be extremely dangerous. So Benjamin Franklin and diplomacy is a concept that comes up in this book. But let's briefly explain who Benjamin Franklin is. Benjamin Franklin was a writer. He was a scientist. He was a political philosopher, and much, much more. You see, Benjamin Franklin had great social intelligence. He was diplomatic, and he was the ambassador of France. It's probably appropriate to inject the definition of diplomacy here, which is the following, quote, the art of dealing with people in a sensitive and tactful way, end of quote. And he would state that the following was part of the secret to his success, quote, I will speak ill of no man, I will speak the good of everybody, end of quote. Let's put this in some practical context. So Leon, he has an amazing business. He understands how to sell a service. Laura, she is a great poet that has a tremendous grasp of the English language, like Shakespeare. And this is examples of seeing the good in people. Because anyone can criticize, condemn and complain, and this is a term that's used in the book, and that is often a detriment to the perpetrator, not just the victim. Remember, there is a separation between criticism and constructive criticism. So perhaps consider taking this idea and speak favorably about people. See their strengths. You could adopt this in your community, in your internet community, in work, in your relationships, etc. It's a good exercise and a good way to develop your social intelligence. So the idea here is to begin with yourself. And I like this idea because it's an important key. This key opens a very important door. So let's consider this example. You want to change someone else. You think they have a bad work ethic and you want them to be better. Maybe you feel Jack could work harder in his business. You feel he can make more money and be more successful. And that can be positive, and the philosophy of helping others clearly is beneficial. But consider first making the changes within yourself. Be aware of your shadow. To put simply, these are the things we don't see within ourselves. For example, you can look in the mirror and you can see yourself physically, but you can't see a bad attitude. You can't see the confirmation biases, etc. Maybe we can discuss this philosophical concept of the shadow in another video. But let the premise be clear. Begin the change in you. It's not about changing someone else's business. It's about changing your business. It's not about changing someone else's character. It's about first changing your character. So this is just a brief intermission as we're going on this journey. I hope you're enjoying the experience so far. I just wanted to say that I would love to hear the opinions on the ideas presented, so consider leaving a comment. And with that being said, let's get back to the program. So the next idea is explaining the process. And when we talk about explaining the process, we can take it in two different directions. Direction 1, you can explain the process, or direction 2, you can give an order. Let's give an example. So your manager says, switch off your phone. Now that's an order. Here's a different strategy. He or she could say, phones can interfere with productivity and make our team look unprofessional, and our presentation is important. Now that is an explanation. If you're running a business screaming we need to make £10,000 a month, that's just aggression. Explaining why we need to make £10,000 a month to cover costs, pay back loans, sustain employment. Now that's explaining the process. Explaining the process is empowerment, and it's an important part of communication. There is an important premise here, and the premise is feeling valued. Simple equation. We can call it science. Explaining the process equals feeling valued. Telling someone what to do without explanation, well, that can feel undermining, and it can hinder that communication process. I mean, think of it this way. You could talk about evolution and you could simply say evolution is true. But if you explain it in a sense where you mention Charles Darwin, you mention the fossil record, you articulate the scientific evidence, that is an explanation. And to put simply, explanation is key. And we can take this to philosophy, politics, relationships, and much, much more. So maybe a good exercise to consider is to engage in explaining the process in your everyday life. So the next idea is the desire to be important. Let's talk about this. So American philosopher John Dewey says we all have a desire to be important. It's almost like this is embedded in our DNA. It's part of our biology. Think about that. So that's the premise of this idea. So let's give a work example. So one of the reasons why people may hate their job is that it does not match this desire of importance. So if Jack collects a check, now that may pay the rent, but if it does not pay that desire of importance, then there is a potential problem here. And that is a reason for deep, deep sadness. This can lead to work depression, which can be soul destroying. But if you enjoy your job and it makes you feel important, then this is less likely to happen. Now in this book, it cites a study that the main reason for wives leaving their marriage was due to a lack of appreciation. So when looking at this example, it makes me realize that appreciating people is such an important currency, and it can't really be overstated. Now, a couple that appreciates each other are more likely to feel that desire of importance, and if a manager recognizes the talents of his team, then they are more likely to feel valued and important. And the book mentions, this power of importance, and it also mentions the power of compliments, though the language may be a bit different. So, for example, I really like your suit. Now, is that compliment not endearing? And this is just to show that compliments can affect our feeling of importance in a positive way on a micro level. Now, before I finish off this idea, I just want to leave you with a quick story. Now, Shakespeare wrote about Macbeth. It's a great story, and Macbeth killed the king. But maybe the primary motivation of that killing was also due to the desire to be important, because who is more important than the king? So here we can think about our own sense of being important and also empathize with other people's sense of importance as well. So another idea in this book is empathy and smiling. I feel that this book really emphasizes on empathy. There is a premise that we think about ourselves 95% of the time. So let's put this in some type of context. So we're thinking about the car. Is it too expensive? Or we're thinking about our home. Is that too expensive? Or we're thinking about the job. Are we getting paid enough? Or you're thinking about your poetry. I think you get the picture. So basically it's that concept of me, 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 me. But here is a concept in the book that is interesting. Think about what they want. To emphasize this point, think of the statement from Cyrus, quote, "They are interested in others when they are interested in us," end of quote. It's not just about you, it's not just about me. It's about them. Ryan Holiday, the writer, who's written many great books, talks about getting outside one's head. And I think this is appropriate to this concept. Let's put it in some type of context. Ask Laura about her art hobby instead of just talking about yourself. Ask people what's going on in their world. This to me is empathy, and it's one of the most important tools in human evolution. Think of it this way. Does not empathy separate us from other animals? Just something to think about. Now also I want to add to this the importance of smiling, and this book really emphasizes this. Smiling, it's endearing, it welcomes people, it's friendly. The action of a smile is a good way to build rapport. It's also a good way to start an interaction. So let's paraphrase this. In simple terms, try to understand someone's universe and give them a smile. So the next idea is to avoid arguments. But before you can avoid an argument, you first need to understand what an argument is. Quote, an exchange of divergent or opposite views, typically a heated or an angry one. End of quote. So quick example, Tom has an argument with his girlfriend. So they have a heated exchange over some divergent points of view. This is a bad thing. So logically, we should try to avoid this. So let's just briefly play a game and let's see how we can start an argument. Well, we could say, your understanding of Shakespeare is terrible. I hate your car. Your house is extraordinarily ugly. Your art is incredibly awful. I think you get the picture. Now, instead of having arguments, it's better to have dialogue. It's better to try and understand people rather than try to judge people. So here's a quick question. Is arguing a sign of poor social intelligence? I think so. Now, of course, there is context, and context is important. But if we are friendly, have empathy, we smile, we are less likely to have arguments. In one sense, arguments are like boxing matches. All participants get hurt. For example, if you're non-judgmental and you show a genuine interest in Sally explaining her passion for science, it's unlikely that you will have an argument, because arguments can be like sharks. They are ferocious in their attacks. And of course, and I'll finish on this note, there are some people that thrive on arguments, and when they go to the right, I go to the left. So generally, I think this is a good philosophy for social intelligence. So in conclusion, we've looked at the following ideas. Now this is in no particular order. So idea number 1, 85% of success is due to personality. So understand that your personality can help your progression. Idea number 2, criticism is dangerous. Criticism can make you look bad. Consider praise or being constructive with your criticism. Idea number 3, begin with yourself. Don't focus on others. First, focus on you. Idea number 4, explain the process. Give explanations that are thoughtful and respectful. Learn how to explain and use it to empower people. Idea number 5, Benjamin Franklin and diplomacy. Diplomacy is a bridge. Diplomacy is a bridge to build relationships and show good social intelligence. Idea number 6, the desire to be important. Understand people's desires to be important and respect it. Idea number 7, empathy and smiling. Empathy and smiling is endearing, and they are good tools for the toolkit in social and in work situations. And finally, idea number 8, avoid arguments. Arguments are often the outcome of toxic relationships. If you can avoid arguments, then this is a good indication of positive relationship building. So that is my book summary. So I sincerely hope you have enjoyed the journey. And if you have enjoyed the journey, consider the following: subscribe, like, and share. I repeat, subscribe, like, and share. Also, consider leaving a comment. To me, a comment is a constructive criticism that is really helpful for my development. So thanks for watching, and hopefully see you on the next video.